Have you checked the children? Your little master.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That's Reezy, y'all. So very stoked to have you with me, and bienvenidos, welcome to the horror show for this segment. And yes, as you can see by the tower of tomes behind me, King is indeed my favorite author, and I've read everything that he has properly published. But in this particular special video today, this is where I finally got around to checking out something that is part of that unpublished, unfinished subcategory of stuff that you can research if you really want to deep dive on the Wikipedia and, you know, like some of those Dark Tower wikis and, you know, places like that. But yeah, this is one that I had really been wanting to do, especially recently, because of the fact that I've been pretty much stuck at home for the last few months, and it's been a very strange experience of just, you know, feeling trapped and the stir craziness, and I'm sure a lot of us have had to deal with this, with so many scary things going on, both socially and, well, health-wise too, out in the world, not just here in the US of A. But yeah, this is my first time discussing after just reading the, so on StephenKing.com, and I'm going to have a link in the description below so you guys can actually check this out. Back in 2009, September 15th, I believe, was when he actually decided to put this up finally. He published, well, not published, but he at least let the public see for the first time a portion of his manuscript for a book called The Cannibals. And so The Cannibals was apparently his second stab at trying to do this trapped under the dome kind of story, albeit in this particular case, he set it in an apartment complex as opposed to like an entire town. So just a little bit of history about that. Under the Dome goes as far back, everybody, as 1978. And I've gone on record, especially when we had it as our book of the month a short time ago. It's not a personal favorite Sai King of mine, but I know there's a lot of apologists, a lot of peeps who love the hell out of Under the Dome, and everybody can relate to, you know, that sort of feeling, especially with what's gone down here in 2020. But yeah, so 78 was his first time working on it, and he wasn't satisfied. He's like, nah, man, whatever. But apparently about 4, almost 5 years later, when he was on the set of Creepshow in Pittsburgh, when he was making that with George Romero, he basically started redeveloping the idea, retrofitting it and doing something drastically different with it. And it was majorly because, yeah, he was at this kind of middle-of-the-road apartment complex kind of area that him and Joe were staying at, because Joe, you know, was also in Creepshow. And so, yeah, he's living in this apartment complex, and, you know, I mean, especially you would probably imagine being this guy from Maine who is used to a more rural, maybe kind of suburban type area, unless he was, you know, in Bangor and whatnot. But even then, like, a huge home, huge lot, property and everything, and not living stacked on top of each other like a can of sardines. And so he got to experience that in the early 80s, and so 82 was when they were filming Creepshow, but 83 was where he finally, after getting much more leeway this time, even though there's only like 125, 26 pages on Stephen King's website, so it's the beginning of the story, the setup of everything going down, I guess he got almost 500 pages or over 500 pages into this manuscript, and he just hit a roadblock, and he eventually abandoned the project. And while we do know that he did return in 2009 for it with Under the Dome, this is a very different sort of setup and situation, and I feel like even rougher in some ways because of the fact that, yeah, if it's this whole town, you know, of Chester Mill like it was in Under the Dome, there's at least a little bit more space, and, you know, it's not as confined and claustrophobic of a situation as what we get in the Cannibals. And so I was like, yeah, in the midst of everything, especially since the story begins on July 19th, and as of this airing, tomorrow is July 19th, yeah, I felt like it was rather befitting. It was originally going to be the plant this week. The plant is going to be moved to next week, and, you know, I'm just kind of doing these little anniversary dives, or in this case, just pertinent subject matter sort of thing. And so, yeah, I read the manuscript, the partial version of The Cannibals, and now the one thing that I will say up front, And a title in this situation is slightly misleading because I feel that all these people in this place called the Tennis Club Apartments, and I don't think they ever specify exactly what state it's in, but you kind of get the vibe it's the Midwest, especially because Tommy Hill, who is kind of our main character of sorts, or at least one of the main ones that we initially get acquainted with, he's talking about how he needs to get away from this TV news station that he works for, and he needs to go east, he needs to go towards New York. That's where people, as they climb that proverbial ladder, that's where they head. And so, yeah, even though it's Squirrel Hill, I think is what they classify it as at one particular point. But yeah, so the day starts out July 19th, and we get acquainted with all of these different people who realize, especially early in the morning with Tommy Hill, and then this other character, I'm trying to remember his name, Pulaski, who is this guy in his 50s who has something called Yell for Yellow. So he has like a taxi cab company that he has been running for a number of years. His partner, deceased, died of lung cancer, made him quit the cigarettes and stuff. But yeah, this is when King was still writing in that kind of fog, that haze that he admitted came to a head around the time the Tommyknockers was released, when his family and friends had an intervention. And so just getting that far into a project and then getting the writer's block and just abandoning it completely, only to completely rework it for Under the Dome. It's a little bit surprising, especially after putting that extent of effort into it, but you also have to remember in the early to mid 80s, that's where King was, despite, the substance stuff that he has mentioned, he was firing on all cylinders. He was putting one, sometimes two books out a year. I think there was even one year, 83, where he had like 3, because there was also the little novelette of Cycle of the Werewolf. So, I mean, yeah, we're talking, despite all the wackiness going on in his head from, the uppers and downers and drinking and everything, I mean, he still was a creative force to be reckoned with, both on the page and with stuff like Creepshow that we mentioned on the screen, various other things that were going down, because he scripted Creepshow. And yes, it's different, but it's still very fascinating in the regard that it's a character study of just how people will start to react when they feel trapped. And I think the Cannibals title, as I alluded to, was that the end game of these people running out of food, being stuck in such a small, much more confined area? Possibly, but don't come into these 120-something pages that you will find on Stephen King's website expecting it to get that far. It just gets you, it gives you like the slightest taste of the unrest that things would continue to boil over and become, and all of that stuff. So pretty fascinating in that regard. So yeah, July 19th, 1980. He doesn't even specify the particular year in the writing, that I thought was kind of funny. And it starts out with part 1, Yellow Morning, and that's where we basically get the vibe of the confined monotony that you even have in the people who are in this complex. So it's 8 floors, 198 units and stuff, but really the biggest and most interesting thing that I found about this was the essence of convenience and trying to stress to people, nah, you don't really have to go venture far out in this wacky world of ours. In the early 80s, obviously, we still had, the tail end of the Red Scare going on, and the Berlin Wall hadn't come down, and we still had communists, across the sea, and all of the fear with regards to that. But, the consumerist society was really, 80s, a lot of people say, like, 80s and 90s were that fluff generation where the buy, and so on and so forth was becoming even more evident than it ever had been before. And so this Tennis Club Apartments, they are adjoined next to this walkway that goes under the major street or highway or whatever it is that's right beside them, and it takes you to this mall, and it's got basically everything you can want, from places to shop at, to go see a movie, to there's this attached fitness club over there. And so really, you could live in the apartments, you could work in one of those adjacent businesses, and get everything you need from food to entertainment, and you don't need to go much further at all. You can just stay in that little, couple in that like square mile area of sorts. And well, I can see the essence of convenience in that, and especially in the consumer society that we were becoming, where we wanted all these frills and all of these things, and I don't know, does property and, just owning things, so to speak, is that reflective of satisfaction in existence? These are interesting points that King kind of just, explores a little bit here and there, despite being the, 100-something pages. But also the monotony of this sort of existence, and the fact that those who don't really venture very far, I mean, are they really living, or are they just robotically going through the motions? How much fulfillment can there necessarily be there? So these are interesting things, but also the kind of unrest that even before this place gets suddenly locked down on the morning of July 19th that we encounter from the fact that there's this full moon scribe as the individual as described as, because we're led to be a mystery about who it could potentially be. But there is like a really nasty graffiti artist that a couple times a month, usually around the full moon, decides to go and put super obscene graffiti on various areas of the building. And then there's also this, cable repair person who goes and like pulls out all of their cables. So all of those creature comforts, those conveniences that we basically rely upon a lot of the time to get through the grind of our daily lives, King is calling them out and calling attention to it, and how people just, when they are suddenly stuck and without those distractions, how crazy they can potentially go. But and then there's this super, his name is Rinaldi, and he's at this Squirrel Hill, leasing separate super, whatever. Anyway, Rinaldi is a kind of stoic and contentious, but not in the way of being volatile. He almost has this indifference to all of his tenants, and he describes them rather amusingly as being one of three things: good tenants, busybodies, or troublemakers. And so good tenants are the ones who, they stay long term. They've got, the senior lease where they lock in a few years as opposed to just like 1 or 6 months or whatever. And they're consistent and respectful, don't cause any trouble. Obviously with troublemakers, that's like, the full moon scribe, or, people who are just rude to one another. But then there's a middle ground, which is the busybodies. And the busybodies are basically those who constantly get together with what was described as delegations. And this phrase that King throws out a couple times, where it's like, "Give me it, it's mine." And he basically says that there are a lot of people who feel that essence of entitlement because of the fact that they're renters, and if there's anything going wrong, whether it's issues with the barbecue pit outside, or, lack of availability for the fitness club, or if there's issues with the one elevator that some people have to utilize to actually move in stuff from time to time because it's a larger, like, kind of freight sort of elevator. These are the sort of things that people form committees and delegations about, and they just make Rinaldi's life far more difficult than he kind of perceives it to be. And King mentions various times that he has this tactic that he takes into consideration a lot of the time with these tenants when they get pissed at him, and he's slow to respond, and he just stands and contemplates for a while before he actually, gives any sort of, interaction back with these tenants that are mad at him. So that's a dynamic. And I already mentioned Tommy Hill, the younger guy. I think he's like mid-30s, 36. He's like right around the same age as me, in where you climb the ladder a little bit, you know that there is a next level of that proverbial tower that you need to get to, and yet maybe there is a slight bit of disillusionment and whatnot. And then there's a couple other interesting characters we meet. There is one, where is her name? Joanne Page. And Joanne Page is this younger lady. She's in her like early 20s-ish, something like that. And she is devoutly religious, so she's a Christian, but she doesn't believe in actual organized religion. And so there's this other woman by the name of Pamela Rick, I think it is. And so she is the older woman who's in her 40s, and she's also religious, and she talked with Joe at one particular time about getting a Bible group together, but in turn she started urging her, you need to go to church, the importance of assembly, and so on and so forth. And of course Joe's younger character is like, well, doesn't it say that if 2 or 3 of us are gathered together, the Spirit of the Lord is flowing around us and is actually a part of the process? And so they have, despite kind of an association that borders on friendship, those particular religious disagreements as far as, just praise and worship and stuff like that, are where they don't necessarily see eye to eye. So yeah, we meet a very compelling cast of characters, and then there's a few other minor ones, like the drug dealer on the 8th floor who sells hash to people, amongst other things, and then you've got some of those, busybodies, like this older runner guy who, once everybody realizes that they're trapped, he starts just mobilizing people and goes after Rinaldi, the super, and stuff like that. So I must admit, I was compelled by these people, and I wanted to learn more about them. And most notably Tommy Hill, Joanne, and then Pulaski, the guy in his 50s with the cab company, who it's him and Tommy Hill at the very beginning, and they're the ones who first discover, because they're the ones that are up bright and early, like 4 in the morning, because of their respective jobs, one being the cab company, the other being the TV network dude. And so they try to leave, and they realize, oh, door's locked. Where's the late night security guy? Can't seem to find his ass. Start looking around. More people start eventually trickling through, and that's where they have to get Rinaldi, the superintendent, involved, just to try to discover what's happening. And then that's where the story starts to veer into far more interesting territory, and I feel like it was going to be much more of a psychedelic story, especially than what you got with Under the Dome. Because Under the Dome, if you're familiar with the end game of how the dome got there, I'm not going to spoil it here, but at least the vagueness that King approached with this, maybe this was one of the situations where he couldn't figure out how to end the story, like give some sort of justification for what is going on. Because seriously, every single door is locked, including some doors that don't even have locks. They won't even budge. And what's-his-face, Pulaski, the older, more volatile, cab owner guy who's got a collection of all kinds of different firearms, and, he's an avid hunter, and my father is an avid hunter, so I'm not here to diss any sort of outdoorsmen or, those who bear arms or anything like that. As long as it's being done in a competent and, well-trained, respectful fashion, that's fine. This guy does have kind of an arsenal, though, just to specify, but he gets a little mad, man, and he's also very fond of dropping some N-bombs a lot in his particular backstory, where you find out about why he bought this particular little baseball bat that he goes and starts trying to bash open the glass doors with and stuff, to no avail, unfortunately. But he has this backstory about being mugged by a couple of brothers, and it's where King, a lot of people have rightfully, I think in some cases, criticized him for that sort of language. Now, I know he always portrays people who use that awful word as being villainous and being bad people. They're not particularly shades of gray. They are much more on that evil sense of things. But nonetheless, it's still tough language to read, and I know he has shied away from it over the years, but especially in his 70s and his 80s work, I feel like it was a little bit more prevalent. And I don't really have much positive to say about that, unfortunately. But so in this older guy's backstory, he gets frustrated and starts carrying around the bat for protection, and he tries bashing open doors. No one is able to get anything open. You can't break anything open. There's like all the fire exits aren't working. Like, they are basically these couple hundred people, if not more, because 198 apartments, that doesn't even include how many people could potentially be in one. It could be a single person, or it could be a family of 5. King doesn't go into that much explanation, but there's most definitely a reality that hundreds and hundreds of people are trapped in this building. Who knows how much food they have. Everybody goes right to getting drunk and stoned and popping pills and Valiums and all kinds of stuff just to try to deal with the situation. That seems the initial coping mechanism, when they're also realizing all of those creature comforts are no longer there. So the telephones aren't working. The TV, there's no connection whatsoever, nothing but snow. There's people going through their radios, AM all the way through the FM band, and they're getting nothing, not a squeak, not a peep of any kind. And so that is the sort of thing that's going to make the tension escalate and significantly rise. And then even on top of that, the psychedelic stuff that I was going to briefly mention is the fact that people are looking outside, and just the outdoor world is not illuminated the way it should be, with the sun rising and the day actually starting. It's almost more of like an orangish glow sort of bit, where it's like only half lit and not quite real. And then even on top of that, there is this essence where, okay, like they're looking across at this car dealership that's just on the other side of this highway, seemingly. And like it's kind of fading in and out of reality, you know, like the traffic is there for a moment and then it's gone, and then you can kind of almost half see it, like it's translucent and ghostly of sorts. Same with like the trees that are around. The trees are like completely disappearing, all the leaves will be gone, and then leaves reappear, but it's more like autumn as opposed to July, and so like the colors have changed and everything. So this is where I really, at least reading this, got the vibe that they were kind of between realities somehow, suddenly, and since I dig that sort of just more psychedelic, dare I say Lovecraftian, Stephen King storytelling, stuff like Crouch End and The Mist and things of that nature, I'm down. And I'm really bummed that this story only exists in this partial manuscript form, because I was intrigued by even Pamela, the older 40-year-old woman who I mentioned earlier, who had the religious disagreements with the younger girl. She still gets this whole weird backstory about, you know, her mother dying and having mistreated her, and then around the same time that her mother passed, she also had like these impacted wisdom teeth, and just she didn't go to a dentist, and so the situation got absolutely awful, and then she becomes this pothead because her nephew Peter is like, you need something for this, and so he introduces her to ganj, and so she's blazing, and that's her medicine, as she looks at it as. And honestly, for a lot of people it is. I'm not here to talk any smack about that, as somebody who knows the very just beneficial aspects of cannabis usage and stuff, especially for everything from insomnia to, you know, terminal cancer patient pain. I mean, various things. Yeah, so you see the pathway she was going down. I know that was much more radical thinking in 1982 or 83, whenever King was putting this together. But even Pamela's character, I mean, the few that we really focus upon, which are, you know, Rinaldi, the Soup, Tommy Hill, the younger TV exec dude who I said was in his 30s, Joanne, the girl in her 20s, and then Pamela, and then also Pulaski, obviously, you know, the taxi driver dude. All of the peeps that we first start to get encountered with, they are well fleshed out, they're compelling, and I really wanted to see how all of them further reacted as tensions rose more, as the situation escalated. And there's an interesting anecdote from Joanne Page's character, where it was something that her father used to always say: things that can't be cured have to be endured. And isn't that what we have all experienced through a good chunk of 2020 so far, and all of the craziness? And I mean, if you're a King completist, this is definitely something that, and what's his face, the older taxi driver dude, the Pulaski guy, he keeps calling everybody baby cakes throughout the entire thing, that I thought was relatively amusing. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not really a super King completist, you might not find as much merit in this as somebody like me, but it's still a fascinating snapshot of how he tried to just rework this story and do something different with it, and just really scale it down, because I feel like it's actually really far scarier by being in this more intimate, confined situation in comparison. And I really want to know, if I know the working title was The Cannibals, but were people eventually going to start chowing on each other when resources are running low? That's my speculation. I don't know about you guys, but what did you think? I know this is a slightly shorter video than some of the other things, these long tier rankings and whatnot, but yeah, especially with, you know, July 19th being tomorrow, I felt like this was one that was pertinent to finally get around to talking about. And yes, have you read this particular excerpt of this book? Do you think it has its merits more so than Under the Dome? If you haven't actually read it, does this compel you to go and read it for free on Stephen King's website? It's just 2 different PDFs. I think they're each like 62, 63 pages, something of that nature. And it's fascinating. Well, I wouldn't say it's required reading. I feel like it's much more timely reading, especially with the last few months that we have all experienced and endured, is probably a better way of putting it. So yeah, The Cannibals. I dug it, and damn was I sad that I couldn't see the entirety of the manuscript that was unearthed in some back drawer in his office when it was being cleaned out a number of years ago. And yeah, I'm glad that I finally got around to reading it. Next up, as far as unreleased, like uncompleted King stuff, is going to be The Plant. That is also available for free to read on Stephen King's website. So yes, everybody, I extend a grande gracias for your time today. It is supremely appreciated. I have been Jaime and Fuego, and you can find moi on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube, where I do have my own separate channel called Infuegotainment. If you feel the inclination to check out the non-spooktacular, that's where I do like comedy and small indie art house sort of stuff, dramas and whatnot. And then I also geek out on things like Star Wars and a few other things back when the movie industry was in significantly better shape than it is right now. It's been a tough year, everybody, as I'm sure it has. We're all enduring it together. So yes, I greatly appreciate you being here. Obviously, like, share, subscribe to this video with the hashtag Hail to Stephen King. And if you want further Sai King, El Rey Palaver, as I affectionately describe him as, you can go to the Facebook group, which is also entitled Hail to Stephen King. We have almost 900 different members on there. Not as big as the tens of thousands on some of these bigger, Facebook groups and, web pages and message boards and stuff that you can chat on. But there is a warmth and a welcoming that myself and most of the stalwarts and cornerstones of this group that's been going for a number of years now attempt to bring an essence of respect more so than anything, not just for Sai King, but for each other and for differing opinions. That's really what it's all about, because art is subjective, as I constantly contend here on this channel. So yes, if you want great Kef, super sweet palaver, I recommend that you go over there and check it out. So once again, I've been Fuego. Y'all have been rad status as per always. And until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, sin amigos, constant readers and viewers alike. Say thank you for stopping through today, and I'm hopeful we share more of this palaver sooner rather than later. Until then, remember to stay scared and read Stephen King. Check this out. I mean, it's 100-something pages, and yeah, it might hit pretty close to home with the kind of 2020 we've all had.